has come out, and they've replaced the word nigger with slave. I'm reading from the original, however. And in 1905, when asked by a Brooklyn librarian about this situation, Mark Twain replied this. He said, "I'm greatly troubled by what you say. I wrote Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn for adults exclusively, and it always distressed me when I find that boys and girls have been allowed access to them. The mind that becomes soiled in youth can never again be washed clean." He says, "I know this by my own experience, and to this day, I cherish an unappeased bitterness against the unfaithful guardians of my own young life, who not only permitted but compelled me to read an unexpurgated Bible through before I was 15 years old. None can do that, never draw a clean, sweet breath again on this side of the grave." So I pick up Huckleberry Finn at the point where Huck has escaped his mean old pap, and he feigned his own death and ended up on an island thinking he was there alone, and instead found a campfire. When he waited to find out who else was on the island with him, he found Jim, the slave of Miss Watson. So here's where we start. "How do you come to be here, Jim, and how'd you get here?" Well, he looked pretty uneasy and didn't say nothing for a minute, and then he says, "Maybe I'd better not tell." "Well, why, Jim?" "Well, there's reasons, but you wouldn't tell on me if I was to tell you, would you, Huck?" "Blamed if I would, Jim." "Well, I believe you, Huck. I'll run off." "Jim! But mind, you said you wouldn't tell. You know, you said you wouldn't tell, Huck." "Well, I did. I said I wouldn't, and I'll stick to it. Honest Injun, I will. The people will call me a low-down abolitionist and despise me for keeping mum, but that don't make no difference. I ain't gonna tell, and I ain't a-going back there anyway, so now let's hear all about it." "All right, well, you see, it was this way. Old Mrs., that's Miss Watson, she pecks on me all the time and treats me pretty rough, but she all said she wouldn't sell me down to Orleans. But I noticed there was a nigger trade around the place considerable lately, and I began to get uneasy. Well, one night I creeps in the door pretty late, and the door wasn't quite shut, and I hear old Mrs. tell the widder she wanted to sell me down to Orleans, but she didn't want to, but she could get $800 for me, and it's such a big stack of money she couldn't resist. The widder, she tried to get her to say she wouldn't do it, but I never waited to hear the rest. I lit out mighty quick, I tell you. I took out down the hill and expect to steal a skiff along the shore somewhere above town, but there was people stirring yet, so I hid in the old tumble-down cooper shop on the bank to wait for everybody to go away. Well, I was there all night, and there was somebody around all the time. Long about 6 in the morning, skiffs started to go by, and about 8 or 9, every skiff that went by along was talking about how your pap came over to town and says you was killed. Well, these last skiffs was full of ladies and gentlemen going over for me to see the place. And sometimes they'd pull up the shore and take a rest before they started to cross. So by the talk, I got to know all about the killing. I was powerful sorry you was killed, Huck, but I ain't no more. I laid there under the shavings all day. I was hungry, but I wasn't afeared, because I knowed old Mrs. and the widow was going to start the camp meeting right after breakfast and be gone all day, and they knows I goes off with the cattle about daylight, so they wouldn't expect to see me around the place, and they wouldn't miss me till after dark in the evening. And the other servants wouldn't miss me because they'd shin out and take holiday as soon as the old folks is out of the way. Well, it come dark, and I took up the river road and went about 2 miles or more to where there weren't no houses. I made up my mind about what I was going to do. You see, if I kept on trying to get away afoot, the dogs would track me, and if I stole a skiff to cross over, they'd miss that skiff, you see, and then they'd know about where I'd land on yonder side and where to pick my track. So I says, a raft is what I was after. I don't make no track. I see a light coming round the point by and by, and so I wade in and I shove a log ahead of me and swum more than halfway across the river and got in amongst the driftwood, kept my head down low and kind of swum again the current till the raft come along. Then I swum to the stern and tucked out of the hole. Clouded up and it was pretty dark for a while, so I climbed up and lay down on the planks. The men is all way yonder in the middle where the lantern was. The river was a-rising, and there was a good current. So I reckoned at about 4 in the morning I'd be 25 miles down the river. Then I'd slip in just before daylight and swim ashore and take to the woods on the Illinois side. But I didn't have no luck. When we was most down to the head of the island, a man began to come aft with this lantern, and I see it weren't no use for to wait, so I slid overboard and struck out for the island. Well, I had a notion I could land most anywhere, but I couldn't bank too bluff. I was most underfoot the island before I found a good place. I went into the woods and judged I wouldn't fool with rafts no more, long as they moved the lantern round about. So I had my pipe and my plug and with matches in my hat, and they weren't wet, so I was all right. And Jim, so you haven't had meat or bread to eat all this time? Why didn't you get mud turkles? Well, how are you going to get them? You can't slip up on them and grab them, and how's a body going to hit them with a rock? How could a body do it in the night? I wasn't going to show myself on the bank in the daytime. Oh, well, that's so, Jim. You've had to keep to the woods all the time, of course. Did you hear him shooting the cannon? Oh, yeah. I know they was after you. I see him go by here, watched him through the bushes. Well, some birds came along, flying a yard or two at a time and lighting. Jim said it was a sign it was going to rain. He said it was a sign when young chickens flew that way, and so he reckoned it was the same way with young birds done it. I was going to catch some of them, but Jim wouldn't let me. He said it was death. He said his father laid mighty sick once, and some of them catched a bird, and his old granny said his father would die, and he did. And Jim said you mustn't count the things that you're going to cook for dinner, because that would bring bad luck. The same as if you shook a tablecloth after sundown. And he said if a man owned a beehive and that man died, the bees must be told about it before sunup next morning, or else the bees would all weaken and quit work and die. Jim said bees wouldn't sting idiots. But I didn't believe that, because I had tried them lots of times and they wouldn't sting me. I had heard about some of these things before, but not all of them. Jim knowed all kinds of signs. He said he knowed most everything. I said it looked to me like all the signs was about bad luck. So I asked him if there weren't any good luck signs. He says, mighty few, and they ain't no use to a body. What you gonna come to know when good luck's coming for it? Want to keep it off? And he said, if you've got hairy arms and a hairy breast, well, it's a sign that you're going to be rich. Well, there's some use in a sign like that, because it's so far ahead. You see, maybe it's got to be, if you got to be poor a long time first, and you might get discouraged and kill yourself if you didn't know by that sign that you're going to be rich by and by. Have you got hairy arms and a hairy breast, Jim? Ah, what's the use to ask that question? Don't you see I has? Well, are you rich? No, but I've been rich once. Going to be rich again. Once I had $14, but I took to speculating and got busted out. What'd you speculate in, Jim? Well, first I tackled stock. Well, what kind of stock? Why, livestock. Cattle, you know. I put $10 in a cow. But I ain't going to risk no more money in stock. The cow up and died in my hands. So you lost the $10. No, I didn't lose it all. I only lost about 9 of it. I sold the hide and tallow for $1.10. Then you had $5.10 left. Did you speculate any more? Yes. You know that one-legged nigger that belongs to old Mr. Bradish? Well, he set up a bank, and he said anybody to put in $1 would get $4 more at the end of the year. Well, all the niggers went in, but they didn't have much. I was the only one that had much. So I stuck out for more than $4. And I said, if I didn't get it, I'd start a bank myself. Well, of course, that nigger wanted to keep me out of the business because he says there won't business enough for two banks. So he said I could put in my $5 and he'd pay me $35 at the end of the year. So I done it. Then I reckoned I'd invest the $35 right off to keep things a-moving. Well, there was a nigger named Bob that had catched a wood flat and his master didn't know it. And I bought it off of him and told him he could take the $35 when the end of the year come. But somebody stole the wood flat that night. And next day, the one-legged nigger said the bank's busted, so there ain't none of us get no money. Well, what'd you do with the 10 cents, Jim? Well, I was going to spend it, but I had a dream. And the dream told me to give it to a nigger named Balaam. Balaam's ass, they call him for short. He's one of them chuckleheads, you know, but he's lucky, they say. See, I wasn't lucky. Well, the dream say, let Balaam invest in them 10 cents, and he'd make a raise for me. Well, Balaam, he took the money, and when he was in church, he heard the preacher say that whoever give to the poor, lend to the Lord, and bound to get his money back 100 times. So, Balaam, he took and give the 10 cents to the poor, and they laid low to see what was going to come to him. Well, what did come of it, Jim? Nothing ever come of it. I couldn't manage to collect that money no way, and Balaam, he couldn't. I ain't going to lend no more money till I see security. Bound to get your money back 100 times, the preacher says. If I could get back to 10 cents, I'd call it squat and be glad and be for the chance. Well, Jim, it's all right anyway, because as long as you're going to be rich again sometime or other. Yes. And I was rich now, come to look at it. I owns myself. And if I was worth $800, I'm rich. I wish I had the money. I wouldn't want no more.